by the United States in Congress assembled, a proclamation. Whereas definitive articles of peace and friendship between the United States of America and His Britannic Majesty were concluded and signed at Paris on the 3rd day of September 1783. We have thought proper by these presents to notify the premises and to all good citizens of these United States, given under the seal of the United States, witness His Excellency Thomas Miffin, our President, at Annapolis, this 14th day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1784. On this day, the United States Congress ratified the Treaty of Paris, ending the American War of Independence. The conflict had begun 10 years previously, a very long war and a very bitter one. It had not just been a war by American patriots against British colonizers, it had also been a civil war between rebels and loyalists. It had torn many parts of the 13 colonies apart and had led to hundreds of thousands of refugees within and without. By the late 1770s, it had become apparent that the war could not go on. Negotiations for peace had begun. So in 1782, the French and the Spanish had suggested to the Americans that the new United States should be basically the 13 colonies, that the Appalachians should be the border, and that the British keep all of the land north of the Ohio River. So that would be present day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, and that the other land up to the Mississippi should be an Indian state under Spanish control. The Americans didn't like the idea of this being hemmed in, one of the reasons why they rebelled in the first place. So they started negotiating directly with London. And it was a good thing they did. Britain at this point realized that they needed somehow to break America away from France and Spain. And the best way to do that would be to be generous with the Americans. So the British were saying, you can have all of it pretty much, except for what is now modern day Canada. Florida would go to the Spanish, and the Ohio country would go to the United States, and all the land up to the Mississippi. They also would allow Americans to fish off Nova Scotia, which was a big deal apparently back then. So the Americans ended up with a better deal dealing directly with Britain, rather than going through the French and Spanish, who had their own desires and what do you call it? Programs or sort of thing. The Spanish really wanted Gibraltar. They've always wanted Gibraltar, and they always get really het up about it. Tiny little piece of territory. They never want to let that go. But they ended up getting Minorca back, which had been British for quite a while. And the French got Senegal. So, people did get something. So, that was the treaty, which was signed in Paris and then sent back to be ratified. Now, there was a severe winter between 1783 and 1784, which delayed many of the representatives that were coming from various states, which meant that right up until the last minute they were debating on whether they could ratify the treaty with only 7 states present. And Jefferson had said that they needed all 9 to be present, and they needed to have them all there because otherwise Britain would go back on the treaty, because then they would say, well, not all of these states ratified it. But eventually, just at the last minute, they did all turn up, and so that was a moot point. So the treaty was ratified by the United States Congress and sent out to London, Paris, and Madrid. Peace had been achieved, but peace would not last. Many problems remained with the border, with compensation towards loyalists who had lost property, and for trade. For many years afterwards, right up until the end of the War of 1812, these issues would remain sore between relations between Britain and the United States. Forts in the Ohio country, British forts, would remain, and British soldiers would remain in those forts. Indians would remain loyal to Britain and would continue attacking the United States, and would be funded and trained and given weapons by the British. Along the St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes, there is a dispute over where the border would lie, what islands belong to whom. So it would remain a problem, and these issues would not be resolved for a while. And they would even continue right up until the 49th parallel became a border in 1849. But all in all, the generous treaty towards the United States would eventually ensure good British-American relations after about 70 years of bad blood. Okay, if you like these videos, come back tomorrow for more. Subscribe, like, and leave a comment.